Hey and welcome to today's video. My name is Julian. On my channel, it's all about making you crypto fit. So that means we talk about stuff as blockchain, cryptocurrencies, decentralization, Bitcoin, and all the other good cryptocurrencies that are out there. Today we talk about a very fundamental video. We talk about how can you actually create or define the value of these cryptocurrencies. Now, and this is a very relevant topic because, and we're going to be diving right into our writing pad here. Key thing, price is what you pay, and value is what you get. And here is a very important kind of concept when we talk about price and value. You make your money when you buy, not when you sell. So what you're trying to do, and this is the key thing, is you try to find something that has value here, but you only pay here. So this should be your profit. And this is a very, very easy concept in the entire kind of system. There's this term called a value investor. And at the end, I believe value investors are what you should be trying to become. The opposite would be a pure speculator or gambling or some kind of trader. At the end, I feel value investor doesn't matter if you invest in real estate, in stocks, in gold, or in cryptocurrencies. That's at the end what you're trying to do. This is exactly that. It's trying to find cheaper price than value. And so let's kind of define those things. So yes, we understand that price is what you pay, but how is the price created? Well, price is created very easily. And you should actually notice, price is two factors. It's supply and demand. And actually, if you go with the formula, it is price equals demand divided by supply. And this is a very, very easy formula, very simple to understand, a very critical one. It's really important. This means if supply goes down, so we have less to offer, well, the price even inevitably goes up if we have the same kind of demand. If demand goes up and supply stays the same, the price goes up of something. So that's just price, right? And in crypto, it's very simple. You go to coinmarketcap.com and you just look at the price of any given cryptocurrency out there that's listed on there, and all it does is, at the very specific moment, it tells you what is supply and demand at that time. So that's how the price is defined. But so now let's talk about value, and value is way harder to define because yes, so I understand. So now we have the price here, so it's this kind of metric, but so how do we get to this value part? And this is relevant. And so here is an answer that you're probably not going to like. Value, and this is the trick. There is no mathematical formula for value. Value lies in the eye of the beholder. And this is very important. There is nothing that inherently defines value. And this is critical because the only way, this is key, the only way how to somehow find any kind of agreement for value is to look for consensus of a group. That's the conclusion. And that's a very philosophical kind of approach, but there's no better way to do this. And this is what makes it so hard. You need to find math, numbers, data, facts in this philosophical statement. It lies in the eyes of the beholder. And this is tricky. Now, if you're the only one who sees something as valuable, but everyone else doesn't, that's, well, completely stupid because that means it's no value. So even if you think it's super valuable and you're paying very little, odds of it going up, well, it's very, very unlikely because the rest of the group never sees that. And now this is where it gets Very important. So let's do a couple of examples here before we actually go into 5 things that I look in a cryptocurrency. But let's first look at something that's relevant. If we have a coin that goes from 1,000 to 10, so basically it went down minus 99%. The question is it cheap or not? And that's actually tricky, because if we just say, yeah, it's cheaper, that just means you're comparing prices, right? You're comparing prices. But it could be that here, the value that was calculated by a consensus maybe was around 1,050. But maybe now the value is only 1 because, I don't know, it became there was a fraud or there were any kind of things. So actually it became super expensive by dropping from 1,000 to 10. And this applies to every cryptocurrency because it's the same story. A cryptocurrency that goes from 1,000 to 2,000, is it now cheaper or more expensive? Well, in price, just in price, it's more expensive, sure. But that doesn't tell us anything. Because maybe there was something so substantial that here we could have calculated the value of 500, so here it was actually expensive. But because of some development or because of some adoption or anything else, maybe now the value is 5,000. And actually it became cheap. And these are some very important concepts that most people don't understand, because all they see, and trust me, I have people who tell me this every single day. Hey, this cryptocurrency is down to like 3 cents and it was $1 before the hype. Now it's 3 cents. Man, this thing cannot go down further. Really? Anything can always go down a minus 100%. It can always. And if it drops by 50%, how much can it go down? Still another minus 100%. You can always lose all your money. So it's very, 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 very important to understand how to value, how to price, and kind of understand this ratio. So let's go into 5 things that I would always consider that is really, really important. So let's look at 5 things. Well, the very first one is a bird in the hand is better than 2 birds in the bush. And that is something that's as simple as it gets. It's one of the oldest pricing models that is out there. I think it's thousands of years old. So 1 bird in the bush, 1 bird in the hand is worth more than 2 in the bush. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it's super relevant because the presence, what's now, so this is there, here now, it's reality already. You need to value this way higher than any kind of promise out there. So reality needs to be valued more than any kind of promise. Now, obviously in this, you need to kind of ask yourself promise and percentage. And this is now where it gets really tricky, right? So you need to, in valuing things, so we're valuing things right now. You need to, you need to be able to understand, are other people gonna see the possibilities that are gonna be happening and at what probabilities this is gonna happen? So when I get asked, why don't you own this cryptocurrency? Why don't you own that cryptocurrency? That is one of the most fundamental approaches that I have out there. And with this, I literally mean this. It's one of the most fundamental approaches. And so few people are able to do this. They treat the future of what could happen as if it's here already. And I can't. For me, it's very difficult sometimes to understand, well, are 2 birds in a bush more valuable or less valuable to me? And that's a very key question. And it's one of these super fundamental things that are just super tricky in the entire concept here. And that is very relevant. The second super key concept in valuing cryptocurrencies is work is not worth anything. Why is this relevant? Well, because I so often hear, well, so much work was put in there. So many things are in there. I worked so hard for this, or this team is working so hard. So what? So what? That doesn't define value. If hard work defines value, completely different people would get paid completely different things. Hard work does not define value. value is definitely defined by something, and that's just a fundamental here, that is rare. Something that's rare gets definitely valued more than something that's completely common. So this is already where something starts. So just because something is rare doesn't necessarily give it value, because it might be the only thing, but it's completely irrelevant. Work does not imply value. Key. It has to be attractive. It is in the eye of the beholder. And that is super, super important, because so often I hear, hey, this cryptocurrency has this really great tech. There's so much work that went in there. So what? That does not give it value. Very, very important. I think there's only a few things that we as humans definitely care about, because at the end, this is what's really rare. And at the end, what's really rare is time. Difficult. Very, very important. We definitely, and with time comes a lot of concepts. It's basic needs, and this is physiological needs: sleep, food, water. Very, very, very basic needs. So these are things we definitely need, right? So that's definitely value, because it kind of guarantees our survival. And then we get to very fundamental things. It's status in a group, because that guarantees survival. It's freedom, and so on. And these are things we value, and these are things we all at the end go down to. So very fundamental questions here, right, that we are getting to. And you need to kind of always see this when you try to value a cryptocurrency. Because if a cryptocurrency is able to do those things, it's allowing you to give you time, it's somehow fulfilling your needs, it gives you status, it gives you freedom, the odds of this cryptocurrency being stronger than another one, being valued by more people the same. Because if you're the only idiot valuing something really high, you're not going to get anywhere, right? You need a group to do this. And this brings us actually to some of the very fundamental concepts that Ben Graham, Warren Buffett, and so on teach, and that's this value investing. But at the end, it's not really value investing. What they do here is, and that only works for cash flowing assets, right? Like real estate, like stocks, and so on, anything that produces a cash flow. It's their fundamental idea that cash, money, allows people to get those things, right? So that is the fundamental idea. So they say with money, people can, to a certain degree, buy time. Money, or this kind of value, not fiat, but the value that's being produced out of something, allows people to get food, to sleep. It allows them to get status. It allows them to get freedom. So anything that has cash flow, and cash flow doesn't necessarily mean fiat. It just means some kind of value that could trade into those other things. That's what people gonna see as valuable. And so that's how they come down with this discounted cash flow model. And this discounted cash flow model basically works in a simple way. How much would you pay to me today? How much? To earn $100 for the next 10 years. So in total, $1,000. How much would you pay for me today for this? And this is a very tricky question, because you're probably not going to pay me $1,000. You would probably want to pay me a bit less, because so you give me today, let's say $900. Well, then over 10 years, you would be making around 11% in return over the 10 years. So that's not much. So maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to give you $500, $400, maybe, I don't know, $800. But so now this is very easy here, because let's say we give it 100% probability. Where it gets tricky now is, how much would you pay me for $200, but you only get it 50% of the time. So it doesn't happen all the time. How much would you pay me? Well, maybe you would pay me the same as in the first example, because you're like, hey, on average, it's kind of the same. But then it gets crazy when we look at startups, right? So in startups, we have a very simple concept where we're like, you know what? It only happens in 1% of the time. In 1% of the time, you're going to be getting $1 billion. $1 billion. How much would you pay for me today in 1%? And then it gets crazier, because maybe we have 0.1%, and so on and so on. And so the trick here is a couple of things. You need to be able to calculate the probabilities, which brings us to the bird in the hand being worth more or less than something in the bush, right? Because at the end, that's the probability. And at the end, we need to understand, what does the majority really value? What does the majority at the end really value? And then how much am I willing to pay for this right now? Because that at the end is what's valued. And Warren Buffett seems to have become very good at this. Now, obviously only in his what he calls a small circle of competence, and that's absolutely fine. The trick here is that this only works for value companies where you can actually kind of calculate this. But so we have had this hurdle, and this doesn't really work for cryptocurrencies, right? Let's face this. In crypto, it's a bit challenging because I think we don't have much value place in crypto because it's more difficult to value. And there's a couple of things where you could do this. One of the things is stock to flow. A video that I talked about a lot. You can just search this, look for Julian Hosp stock to flow in Bitcoin. And here, this is kind of a value model, and I like to use that model, and I'm quite confident in this model, right? It's a pure model. It's a model that predicts Bitcoin going to over $100,000 in the next couple of years. So there's quite some interesting approaches to this. Obviously, we're not 100% sure about the probabilities here, but there is some kind of understanding to that. Now, stock to flow doesn't work for most cryptocurrencies. It works only pretty much for Bitcoin because only Bitcoin has these kind of concepts. But so now let's get to a one that could really work, and that's basically the growth model. Now, the problem in crypto is not new. It has been existing in startups and so on all the time. And this big question is, how do you value startups? How do you value a company that doesn't produce cash flow over the next 10 years? How do you value this thing? Well, and then suddenly we come up with all kinds of ideas. So one of those ideas is, well, let's look at the network. And we have this in crypto as well. It's called this network value, NVT, where the current price is seen as active addresses and how active these addresses are. It's based on this concept that technology is quite cheap to copy. Remember this. Technology is very cheap to copy. What's difficult and expensive to copy is the network, right? The network, you cannot copy people. So that's the really expensive part in all this. Obviously, another growth model is adoption. And then obviously the percentages in change, right? So the percentages in change. How fast do these models go up? Are they rapidly increasing? Are they not so much increasing? And so these are things that I really love to look at. So here with adoption, it's really about use case. And again, here's the key thing. What's more valuable, a bird in the hand or two in the bush? Is it the possible use case with the probability in 5 years, or is it the existing use case today? Is it the bird today? Is it the number of users that I have? Is it the rate of change? These are questions that you need to put into all of your value models. And so this might be difficult to value in absolute terms. So here, this is where we're talking about absolute valuations. Here, we're also talking about absolute. But so now, since this can be very tricky, we need to use a fifth one, and that's kind of the relative one. And so here we're going, and we're kind of comparing models to existing models. Very easy as Bitcoin again. For example, we look at Bitcoin and we compare it to gold. So we look at gold, right? It's one that I discuss in my book, Cryptocurrencies Explained Simply, where I discuss why could Bitcoin get into $500,000? Why could Bitcoin become worth $1 million, one Bitcoin? And it's pure relative one. But so this now where it gets very relevant in other kind of examples. So this is where I would go, for example, because these are questions that I get asked all the time. How would you value Ethereum? So let's do some examples here, right? So we have kind of, these are some basic ground rules here. So let's kind of look at the largest cryptocurrency. So how would you value Ethereum? Value Ethereum. And so obviously, well, one bird in the hand could be worth more than two in the bush. And I think for Ethereum, this is already where we're starting. In Ethereum, we definitely need quite some growth. We need to have quite some pieces there. And this is what's really important. Ethereum at the moment doesn't have a cap, so it's definitely not completely rare. But so now we cannot really use the absolute model here. We don't have a stock to flow. But when we get to kind of the growth model, well, then it gets very relevant. Do I think that the tech of Ethereum is better than the other decentralized smart contract tech? I don't think so. I think it's probably worse in some aspects. But Ethereum by far has the largest network. It has the largest existing adoption. It might not have the highest growth rate, but it still has the strongest growth rate on all of those, especially meetups. But so now the question is, what is the value at the end? Is this entire thing worth $1 billion? Well, then at the moment it's overvalued and it's actually gonna drop further. Could this thing be worth $5 billion? Could it be worth 10 billion? Who knows, right? And this is where it gets very, very, very tricky and really, really important. Now, I could completely see that Ethereum can become 100, 200, 300 billion dollars, maybe even $1 trillion. But it comes down to, again, one thing. What's the exact use case? What's the use case that Ethereum is going to solve, right? And that's going to, and it's not about, and again, it comes down to probability. It's about the two birds in the bush and one bird in the hand. And these are some very, very key things. The same applies to XRP. What's the value of XRP? How much is this company or this network and so on worth? And these are some very important questions. And so now here is where it gets key in to kind of summarize all this here. These are some of my suggestions to you. If you have a high likelihood of understanding the one bird versus the two birds, so basically understanding present versus future, if you have a high percentage there, that's already a very good sign. So that means it's not about the probability of getting it, it's understanding the part, right? So it might be here that actually getting the two birds is very unlikely, it's very unlikely. But you can at least calculate, hey, 5% of the times, I'm going to be getting two birds, right? And so at the end, well, if you have over 20x, it makes more sense to bet on the two birds versus the one bird. But you need to understand, you need to be able to calculate this, right? So how likely is it for Ethereum to go where it has to go? How likely is it for Bitcoin to go where it has to go? Or maybe it's already there. Very, 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 that's the very first one that I would try to calculate in all of this. Try to calculate that. The probability. And then have a high likelihood, a high probability in actually pricing it at that point. Right? So these are the two things that I would love to see. A high likelihood in being able to see the probability of getting there, and then pricing it at that level. Pricing meaning, okay, Ethereum price, if it gets there, what's it worth? Well, if it gets to a status where Amazon is today because it kind of powers so many things, it could be $1 trillion. Okay, great. So price it there. And how confident are you in this pricing? Is this just something you hear on Reddit or on Twitter, or is it something that you're really, really solid about? And once you have those two, then you can start doing some math. And then you can actually go and say, you know what? At the moment, this thing is worth X. It's priced at X. But X is only 1/10 of Y, and Y is the value at the moment. And the probabilities are just really, really, really good. I mean, the probabilities that it gets there are 50%. Well, then I would always do it because you have a 10x upside, and it happens in 50% of the times. So it's a really, really, really good upside. But in most cases, this is actually not the case. And so this leads me, and this is the answer to questions that I get all the time. Why don't you invest into this cryptocurrency? It doesn't necessarily mean I don't believe in a cryptocurrency. It means I'm not able to price this thing. Maybe I'm able to price it at an end stage, but I cannot calculate the probability of getting there. Or I can calculate probabilities, but then I don't know what's it going to be worth at the end. It doesn't help me if I know, hey, they're definitely going to be able to do it, but maybe that thing is still worthless, even though they get there. And this is why I'm investing maybe in a handful of cryptocurrencies, mostly in Bitcoin, mostly into projects that I can really understand. And this is what I would highly recommend you to do as well. Because if you don't do this, you're the speculator that doesn't, like it. I'm not saying that the crypto stays speculative, but at the end, it's really coming down to put the odds into your side. And this is something that's very, very key. So let me know what you think about those 5 things. Let me know if I forgot anything that you feel should be added. And then, very interesting, let me know in the comments below. Where do you see cryptocurrencies where the value is really, really high? Maybe you could put the value there even. Maybe you could say, hey, you know what, that token should be worth that much. Explain why, how do you get there, and what the price is right now. and then kind of see a bit the rationale of you posting that, and not just saying, oh, that thing is, I don't know, can go to $10. Why could it go there? Like, what's the rationale behind it? These answers probably shouldn't be too short. They should actually be a bit of a paragraph. Yeah, but it would be interesting to see that. If you like this stuff, please give me a thumbs up. Share this video, really, really important. Let me know below that you like this, then I can go more into this direction. And other than that, I'll see you at the next videos. Please subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time. Thank you, Mark. You have opened my eyes. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks for being here. I'll see you at the next video. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.